Hey everyone, Chase here from the Cruiser Cult. Today we're going to do our second installment of our masterclass series with Owner, and he's going to talk to us today about the Toyota Keiretsu system. Let's see if we can get him on. Let's see. Hey,
Hey Chase, how you doing, man?
good. How are you?
Good. Cheers. How you doing? End of the work week.
Cheers. I don't have a drink, but yeah, it's been a long week.
It has been a long week. How's it going?
Good, good. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Turning wrenches, busting knuckles, talking on the phone, doing emails, doing invoices. You know, life,
Yeah, the,
life.
the photos you've been posting are looking nice. Those projects are awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, we're pretty much done with a really nice patina 1969 that had a full mechanical restoration, and and we're getting ready to put that on a bringer trailer basically. So and yeah, so the bringer trailer camera specialist came out and took hundreds of pictures. We did some driving photos, did some drone stuff, and we're going to be doing some technical discussion about the work that we did as well too. So there's documentary there's documentary sort of confirmation of the types of work that was done on the truck. So yeah, it was pretty good,
Very cool.
pretty solid day, and I can now have a beer and feel
Relax
good.
and school us all on Toyota.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to school y'all on anything. I mean, but I guess the best place to start, I think at least from the point of view of giving an overview of how the entire system works. So when Toyota started in the 1930s, the entire company itself was really not a vehicle company. The company was a loom manufacturing company. So they made machines for the textile industry. The textile industry itself was quite lucrative for Toyota, and they were able to spin off basically Keiichiro's interest in automobiles, and they were able to then create in the small corner of Toyota Industries Corporation, in the small corner of the warehouse or the manufacturing facility. They got to work trying to put some cars together, and it obviously has developed and grown and become quite a very large operation, as we all well know, to say the least. So I think everyone kind of has a pretty decent idea of what Toyota is and who Toyota is and whatnot. My main interest, I think, in discussing today is going to be how the Toyota system works in terms of how the corporate logic works, as well as how all of the companies basically engage and interact with each other. So the Toyota Group itself is roughly about 15 to 20 internal companies, what Toyota likes to call internal companies that make up the Toyota Group.
Wow.
These are companies that we all pretty much know. If you know Land Cruisers, you probably know these companies. You have Aishin Seiki, you have the Denso Corporation, formerly Nippon Denso. You have other companies like Toyota Industries Corporation. You have Toyota Boshuku. You have Toyota Gozai. You have Aichi Steel Corporation. So all these companies are inherently themselves massive companies. Aishin is the third or fourth largest automotive part supplier on the planet.
Wow.
Denso, I believe, is number two or number three. So these are themselves massive companies. These aren't like, small mom and pop operations. These are huge companies with, multiple thousands of people all around the world that create parts and assemblies and things like that for the manufacture of automobiles. So the Toyota Group started out obviously with the loom operation, and went from the loom operation into automotive, right? So they went into automotive. The companies that we know very well, Aishin, IT Steel Corporation, Toyota Industries, Toyota Boshuku, Toyota Gozai, Toyota Auto Body for that matter, all of those companies were started internally at Toyota. So they were internal divisions of Toyota that were then spun off. After World War II, there were these groups of, they're conglomerates, really, industrial conglomerates called Zaibatsus. And the Zaibatsu was really the initial sort of, the Zaibatsus were the initial sort of monopolistic companies and groups that controlled pretty much all industry and banking in Japan post World War II. The occupation government led by MacArthur basically disbanded all the Zaibatsus and tore them into pieces and tore them into smaller companies. So there was no influence between them. So these are companies like Mitsui, these are companies like Mitsubishi, this is like Kawasaki, these are Sumitomo. These are very, very large, massive corporations that have they have their hands in everything. So what these companies came up with, and those companies specifically, are very much always led by some type of a banking institution, so financial control. What they decided to do after, what they ended up deciding to do after being torn apart after World War II was, okay, well, if we cannot have the types of monopoly control that we had over very, varied industries, we're going to create a different way to organize our control over, we're going to, sort of create a different way to control different industries, or have our hands in different industries in some fashion or form. So they created basically this Keiretsu system. Toyota is actually one of the few conglomerates, Toyota's one of the few conglomerates that actually does not have a banking organization that runs it at the top. Mitsui, Mitsubishi, Kawasaki, Sumitomo all have banks associated with them. And those banks are the leaders of these large conglomerates. Toyota doesn't have a bank. They actually rely on Mitsui and Sumitomo, who also have controlling shares or minority shares in the Toyota group itself. So it's kind of cool to see how this kind of development worked out. So getting back to the Toyota group, there's no bank associated with the Toyota group. And sorry, 1 second, I'm going to switch something.
Yep.
Hang tight 1 second, please.
Yep.
Sorry, can you hear me again? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I had to turn the Wi-Fi off. It wasn't working very well. So the Toyota Group does not have a bank associated with its control over all of the different organizations that are subsumed under the Toyota Group. So we all know these other companies: Denso, Aishin, Seiki, Toyota Auto Body, Toyota Industries. All of these companies basically started out as divisions within the Toyota sort of Toyota company, Toyota Automotive. So there was an in-house electrical company that did all the electrical stuff that needed to happen to manufacture automobiles. To do this, and to do, to do this well and in a way that would not break any of the rulings that were sort of post-war Japan. The Toyota Group basically said, okay, Toyota basically said, okay, let's spin you off. So basically Toyota would then say, hey, Joe Schmo, in electrical, you're the head engineer, the head manager of the electrical division. We're going to give you $10 million or whatever the actual initial capital investment was. And you are going to go and you're going to create electrical components for us as your own company. We will be your main customer, and you will need to consistently make sure that we are your main customer, and you will then make electrical components for us. So they did this with Denso. So that became Nippon Denso, basically. They did this with other component systems. Transmissions, for example, is another, and chassis components is another good example of how they took their in-house specialty in a certain division and then spun it off into its own company. So they did this with Aishin, they did this with Denso. Aichi Steel Corporation, which used to be the in-house forge, forging products, stamping products, any type of metal manufacturer, specialty steels, were in a different division within Toyota, and they said, okay, we're going to have you spun off, and you're going to be a different supplier to us as your main customer. You can, of course, sell your components to other people as well too. So Honda would come in and they would buy Denso parts. So if you go into a Honda, you're going to see, a Denso alternator, for example. Honda did. So that's sort of an example of that. Then, then you had other companies like Arakawa. Arakawa started off as a guy in the stamping and body assembly portion of the final assembly line, who said, okay, Mr. Toyota came to him, Kiichiro Toyota came to him and said, Mr. Arakawa, we'd like you to, we're going to give you $10 million. We'd like for you to go and assemble cars for us. So that happened every time internally. So all of these internal Toyota companies that are part of the Toyota group all started out as differing divisions within the larger Toyota manufacturing company for automobiles. And of course they have a lot of other things that are going on as well too. It's not, for example, Denso just doesn't make electrical components. They make lots of other things as well too. Aishin just doesn't make transmissions. They make, things like door strikers. They make all sorts of other weird things. They make steering gearboxes and all sorts of other really weird little components. So the automotive industry is split up into what's called the tier system. The tier system is a pretty accepted way of creating relationships between an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer, and their suppliers. The interesting part about this is the tier system kind of works out as a pyramid going all the way down. So all of Toyota's suppliers are, generally speaking, what you call a tier 1 supplier. They're very large, they're very diversified, and they have, generally speaking, some monetary investment from the mothership, i.e. Toyota, into the sort of supplier. So Toyota owns, let's say, for example, 41% of Aishin Seiki. They do this not only to have a say in what occurs at the company, but they also do it so there's no hostile takeovers of Aishin Seiki from someone outside who wants to come in and take it over. And they also are able to protect a lot of their intellectual property that Toyota presented and gave to Aishin, because Aishin creates all sorts of these components and products for Toyota, for Aishin to stay true and to keep those secrets, not secrets, maybe they're secrets, but
right.
to keep that relationship, exclusive. Toyota makes sure that they have a controlling interest, they have a controlling majority shareholder in all of these companies. So we see this with, for example, the small vehicle manufacturer Daihatsu. Daihatsu was its own company for many, many years. And in the 60s, Toyota slowly started buying up the common shares available to the public. So eventually Toyota became the majority shareholder of Daihatsu. And then in, I believe, 2016, bought the company outright and made it an in-house small vehicle company. So Daihatsu is now fully owned by Toyota. This is the same thing with Hino for big trucks. Those big, massive trucks that you see in the Dakar, videos and things like that. Hino is a wholly owned subsidiary of Toyota. So you can see how they basically start taking control over a lot of these, and it makes sense most of the time to bring these things in-house, because then there's going to be full engineering, full procurement synergies between the two companies, even though Hino itself is its own company, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Excuse me. There's a lot of this kind of stuff that happens with Toyota and their suppliers. Toyota has currently, I was pulling up the information the other day, and I found it to be quite interesting. Toyota currently has 268 tier 1 suppliers in Japan alone. So That's anything from that's anything from Kawasaki Industrial to Inoak to Kojima Press to Gifu to all Art Pistons, all of these. So there's 268 tier one suppliers. All of those tier one suppliers then have hundreds of suppliers under them, and then all of those suppliers have hundreds of suppliers under them. So they're to make, let's say, one part, let's say I don't know, an H55 transmission. You might have 500 suppliers that are supplying one little part to that assembly. That
Wow.
eventually gets assembled in at some factory in Japan by Aishin as the final sort of person or company that presents this.
Okay.
All components are like that, and that's not just Toyota. All of the car companies have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suppliers, all the way down that provide them. Sometimes all they do is provide a washer that gets put into a bolt that then gets bolted onto an Aishin transmission, for example. So, there are lots of really, really intricate relationships between Toyota, the engineering aspect of Toyota, i.e. the development of a vehicle, and then how that information is then passed on to suppliers so they can then create the parts that they need to then be able to create the assemblies that are needed. Then the assemblies then become vehicles, right? What's been happening, at least within the Toyota group over the past 5 to 6 years, obviously we're seeing a pretty radical shift in how the automotive world is changing toward electrification. All the suppliers now are have to shift mainly their R&D budgets as well as their relationship with Toyota to continue being preferred suppliers to Toyota. There's always competition. Toyota always makes different suppliers argue with each other. So for example, here's a good example. 100 series, what do you call it? 100 series Serpentine belt. For a certain period of time, 100 series Serpentine belt was manufactured by Bando. Bando is a supplier to Toyota. And what ended up happening is Toyota says, okay, every design cycle, there's going to be competition amongst the suppliers for certain parts. So interestingly enough, afterwards, Mitsubishi won a certain portion of the Serpentine belt production for a period of time, and Mitsubishi was providing Serpentine belts for the 100 series, for the 2UZ-FE. Dayco was involved in that as well too. Gates even sometimes gets involved and is a supplier for a lot of these types of people. So it's interesting from the point of view that they have this internal competition, that they're always pitting different suppliers against each other. And they do this mainly to reduce cost. Obviously, that's the most important thing. As I've always said to people all the time, Toyota's in the money and is in the business to make money. They just happen to make cars. That just happens to be the product that they make. But they're in the business to print money as much as possible. And they do a good job, obviously.
Yeah.
And their entire system is created, and their entire system has been developed so that they can make money. A part of making money is reducing your costs consistently. A 3 to 5% yearly decrease in component level costs for manufacture, when you exponentially expand that across 9 million vehicles, that could be 250 million. That could be $300 million in cost savings. That's not a drop in the bucket. So Toyota always pits their people against each other. But the good thing about what Toyota does, and this is quite antithetical to the way the American auto manufacturers treat their suppliers, is they have this feeling of mother and father. The father is the harsh one. The father is the person who is going to be the person yelling at you or grounding you or taking away your smartphone, or it's going to be the putative sort of the person who's going to be chastising you. Whereas the
Yeah.
mother is going to be the warm person, right? The mother's going to be giving you a hug and saying, it's okay. I know you didn't know. that you shouldn't do this. Now you know, and dad will be, I'll take care of dad. And that's Toyota. So they have that yin and yang going on all the time with all their suppliers. Less so, let's say, with the Denso or an Aishin. Denso and Aishin, for example, are too massive at this point. They are on par with Toyota in terms of their ability to tell Toyota, yeah, I don't think so. I think we're going to do what we want to do anyway. So, but the relationship is still very strong, obviously. But Aishin makes parts for plenty of other automotive manufacturers. Denso makes parts for plenty of other automotive manufacturers. And Toyota will always be the customer number one for these companies because they're a part of the Toyota group, but they'll never let Toyota actually tell them how to go about their business because they've become way too successful and way too large.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing that Toyota does with their suppliers, Toyota will always, so like let's say a chief engineer gets pretty high up at Toyota, has been a chief engineer of a vehicle for quite a long time, and his time of being a chief engineer is done. He'll go on to either doing special projects, or he'll go up the executive food chain and become become a vice president, or will become an executive director of some portion of the business for Toyota. The other thing that they do is they will actually take those people and put them onto the board or the executive committee, or will in fact actually make them the CEO of Aishin or Denso. So you always have transfer of people from Toyota, especially executive leadership and engineering leadership, always will move into usually the board or in an executive management position of a Toyota supplier company, which is kind of cool. So plenty of times, for example, that book you sent me on Arakawa auto body history, Hanji Umohara, who named the Toyota Land Cruiser, after he retired from his position at Toyota as the technical director of engineering, he just went over and became, he just goes on to become a cog within the Arakawa auto body infrastructure. Okay. So there's constantly this, I don't want to say incestuous, but it is kind of incestuous relationship between Toyota and their suppliers. This goes down to the level of engineering as well too. So Toyota will always have embedded engineers within their suppliers, and these people are there to provide, generally speaking, to provide technical assistance, to do sign off on engineering designs, final component designs, and other sort of engineering-based and documentary-based decision-making that occurs at a supplier. So, for example, Arakawa Auto Body, they don't have to go to Toyota. They don't have to go to Toyota and say, here you go, please check our work. Like, they don't do that. Toyota says, here is the design of the 300 series Land Cruiser. It is your responsibility to build the vehicle to our design model that we have created for you. Here you go. Here is the entire document for every single component. Build me a Land Cruiser. And Arakawa or Araco or now Toyota Auto Body, they go and they build the Land Cruiser with very little assistance from Toyota beyond basically final sign-off. Final sign-off from chief engineering. Obviously, chief engineer has control over the entire program. Final sign-off from production management. Final sign-off on manufacturing control. Final sign-off on production cost control. Final sign-off on all component assemblies. And Arakawa is responsible for going to all the other suppliers who are providing these parts. Generally, there's Toyota Group people, to then come back to them and say, yes, we're able to design the component to the engineering documentary, sort of documentation and specifications that's provided by whoever the engineer is at Toyota. We'll go ahead and do that. Here's our first, iteration of it. This is cost control on it. Here is what we think we can make it for. Here's our monthly component level production basis. So it's very much like that. So Toyota trusts their suppliers. They have a agreeable, positive relationship with their suppliers. It is not antagonistic. American car makers generally have an antagonistic, or actually antagonistic is not the correct word, agonistic sort of relationship with their suppliers. Those suppliers, at least in the United States, for example, are always have to fight with the mothership to say, this is like what we're doing and we can do it for this price. And they're coming back saying, no, pound sand, we're getting someone else. Toyota will come back and say, if you can't, let's say, okay, we'll give you a contract for 5 years to make a certain component at this price structure. We expect you to come back as a trusted supplier of ours, as someone that we have been doing business with for a very long time, as someone that we have a very strong relationship with. We expect you to come back in 5 years and tell us how you can reduce the cost of the component or the part, how you can actually make it better and or strengthen it, or make it more reliable, or have more longevity, or make it more durable. And then we also want you to do the prototype testing on it, and that's going to be your job. So once this information is handed over to a supplier, Toyota assumes that they will always do their own internal TPS, Toyota Production System activities, Kaizen, all of your Jidoka, all of your your catchwords and buzzwords that you hear in Toyota production, Toyota Production System land, all the stuff that is at this point it's so ingrained in them, it's sort of just the way they do things. And what's interesting when you think about it is how the historical development of Toyota as a car company was part and parcel with also the historical development of a lot of the interesting, what I like to call advancements in automotive technologies that occurred. And Toyota really was quite important throughout the 1960s and 70s, especially, for allowing their suppliers to really, really be at the forefront of automotive component engineering, part engineering. Of course, things like having Toyota as your mothership is a good type of thing, because
Right.
they're always buying your stocks. They're always reinvesting money in you. So you always know that you have the ability to go back to the mothership and basically ask for more money, as long as you can justify it from the point of view of long-term cost savings, long-term production quality, long-term basically rewards back to Toyota in whatever way that might be. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've yacked for a little bit. Ask me a question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a point when you were talking about the control of semi-control, especially like Denso and some of the other larger ones. I remember doing I was trying to do a history on Yazaki,
Mm-hmm.
and I came across some articles about them getting busted, I think along with Denso, for price fixing against Toyota. And I thought that was really fascinating, because I always assumed, Toyota had absolute control. So it was really interesting to hear you say that, some of them become so large,
Yes.
that they're starting to kind of try to call their own
And
shots.
yeah, and the funny thing is, Yazaki is not a Toyota Group company, but they're a very, very important Toyota supplier for, electrical wiring harnesses. All your dash clusters and meters are manufactured by Yazaki. Well, they're one of the manufacturers, but the largest manufacturer, and at least for our purposes with Toyota Land Cruisers, Yazaki has historically been the meter and electrical wiring harness manufacturer for Toyota. So the price fixing thing that came up with Denso, Aishin, I think what do you call it was involved, T-Rad with the radiators, the price fixing thing that occurred there. Basically, it's all just bro deals. I mean, that's all they're doing. It's just bro deals. These guys, I mean, I'm being kind of flippant. They go
Yeah.
out and hang out with each other, and they're like, oh, wait a second, maybe we can get more money for this stuff. And hold on a second. Like, they're not going to know, because they already trust us, to a certain degree. I'm
Yeah.
being really simple about the scenario,
Right.
but the relationships are so close between each other that something like that can easily happen. Like, I remember going and stealing gumballs from my brother and then selling them back to him. I mean, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, um, again, kind of a flippant example, but
Yeah.
so there is a lot of that kind of, quid pro quo that occurs. 100% guaranteed all the time. I mean, that happens not only in the automotive world, that happens in a lot of the business world. It's just
Right.
they got caught. I mean, like a lot of these massive companies, it's just a matter of time before they get caught for doing something anti-competitive, or for monopolistic, or price gouging, any of those types of things. Especially these companies that have a stranglehold on specific component systems for an OEM. Aishin is the only company that makes certain parts for a vehicle. That's just the reality of it. It's one source supplier.
Mhm.
Now, Toyota is changing a lot of their supply structure and supply chain, as we've seen with the microchip and all of the other issues that all of the automotive manufacturers have been having with supplier relationships, is moving from a single source supplier to a multiple source supplier at all the different tiers. So not just tier one, but Toyota is going to Denso and saying, I want to know every single one of your suppliers. Get me a list. Then Toyota will go to those suppliers, say, I want to know every single one of your suppliers. Get me a list. What do they manufacture? What's the cost? So Toyota's digging deep now, and has been for a number of years now, which is why they did, kind of better than a lot of the other automotive manufacturers with withstanding the microchip shortage for a lot longer, and why they leapfrogged over GM this year, and why they will continue to be most likely, still the largest automotive manufacturer for the foreseeable future, mainly because they were able to mitigate a lot of their they were able to cushion, which is really anti the Toyota production system, i.e. stockpiling parts. You don't do that. It's everything is just in time, right? That's like the whole logic between what they do. I think we're going to see a lot of changes in that. I think we are going to see, for example, a lot of offshoring of component parts to other manufacturers globally, not just in Japan. We're already seeing that with a lot of parts for Toyota Land Cruisers. We're seeing parts being manufactured in Vietnam, in China, in Thailand, in Singapore, in Taiwan. We're seeing a lot of that, Korea, and that's actually, there's, especially all of us who are interested in Toyota Land Cruisers, we are pretty intent on making sure our stuff comes from Japan, right?
Right.
It's Japanese made, and this, that, and the other thing. That's going to change radically and quite quickly, pretty soon too. That's going to happen within the next 3 to 4 years, where a good portion of components that were formerly made in Japan will be regionalized. So you'll have regionalized production.
Hmm.
Good example. All of the vehicles made in the United States by Toyota here, your Tundras and Tacoma, fully now manufactured in Mexico, no longer made in the United States. It's a made in Mexico vehicle. But all of those other vehicles, Camry and Sequoia and Corolla, all of those, they have very little Japanese content in their vehicles. All of their suppliers are here in the United States. Now, it could be Aishin Company that is still making the Aishin part that was made in Japan formerly, but now it's Aishin, Mississippi, to make a certain component that goes to the Blue Springs Corolla plant in Mississippi. So those companies, again, are recreating themselves in a different fashion in different parts of the world. So again, some quick numbers: 944 global companies that provide parts for Toyota automotive manufacturing.
Wow.
Those are tier one and tier two.
Wow.
944 companies that provide component level or part assembly level part support for Toyota automotive manufacturing globally. So think of Toyota in a global sense. In Japan, there are 268 companies, 268 different tier one and tier two companies that basically provide all of the components that are used for Japan manufacture only. And then there are 127 companies that do all of your support or the actual manufacturing of like things like jigs, machines, robots,
Mhm.
all of the other, provide logistics support. They're the ones who drive the trucks. They're the ones who, packaging companies and stuff like that. There are 127
Okay.
of those, 127 of those companies
Wow.
in Japan. So you can see, I mean, it keeps going down very, very deep. It's not as simple as it seems. A small nut or a bolt could have, could have 30 different people could be manufacturing a nut or a bolt to be put onto even just the same vehicle,
Oh
on the
wow.
side of the assembly line. So I mean, it's pretty complicated. I was talking to a friend of mine who's an engineer at the San Antonio truck plant, uh, and he's I forgot he's chassis engineer, but he deals in a lot in logistics and purchasing from the
Hmm.
point of view of cost control. And he's blown away by how 1 week, literally, there's one supplier. And then a week later, there's a brand new supplier who just got introduced and who's making the same part. And he goes to inquire, like, it was this company. Why is it now another company? And basically they said, COVID hit. These people have like no ability to make the quantities that we need in the time that we need it. So we had to go find a different supplier. And that's happening
Wow.
more. That's happening more and more. And another thing recently that popped up in the news, I found it funny because like everyone blew up about it, was that Toyota was accepting quasi substandard or blemish
Oh
parts
yeah,
to
yeah.
be used in the manufacture in the manufacturing process. And the funny thing is that the delineation wasn't made that it's actually parts that you'll never see. So there were usually
Yeah.
cosmetic blemishes or slight casting differences in certain metals that would have previously been outbinned, basically recycled and whatnot. They're accepting them because, to a certain degree, like, what if the supply runs out? Like, then
Yeah.
you're SOL. You're not being able to manufacture these cars. So my understanding of it, and again, I checked in on my sources, and they're like, yeah, dude, don't believe everything you read. The parts are fine. They meet all of the
Yeah.
minimum specifications per the engineering drawing. They meet all the material science specifications. They meet all operation specifics. I mean, they meet all of the criteria, but maybe they just kind of look, it might not look the best, or, you know, but it's in a position where you're not going to see them. It's not like they're accepting a dashboard that's got paint running down it, or
Right.
it's not like they're accepting a rim that's been bashed on or something like that. It's nothing like that. It's just internal stuff and most of the time it's actually internal to an entire assembly. So like a certain part inside of another part might actually be like might not look as good as it might have previously. So
Got it.
mm.
Yeah, that was funny to see people's reactions to that.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it. I mean, everything is, I mean, listen, the entire media ecosystem and is all about sensation. From
Right.
the bullshit that you see on Instagram to Facebook and fucking, I'm sorry, my language, all the stuff you see, it's all about sensationalism.
Yeah.
Mine's cooler than yours. I mean, like that's the whole point, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be wowed by whatever. So, and that's what automotive journalism is all about too. I mean, that's, to be sensationalized and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm confident that a lot of the changes going on at the Toyota Group, and at least what I'm seeing, and the way they have restructured the company and how they've restructured their entire supplier system to try to cushion things like, COVID that no one knew about, or the global supply chain snafus that have been happening, or the lack of different components and parts. Uh, uh, from what I'm seeing and just what I'm, reading in the automotive sort of what I call the internal automotive press, that is much more associated with automotive manufacturing and logistics and things like that. Toyota, again, seems to be reconfiguring their entire business, changing things in a quite rapid way to make sure this stuff doesn't happen again in the future. I mean, did I read that the Land Cruiser has a 4-year waiting list, the 300 series in Japan?
I thought I saw
In
that too.
Japan, yeah, a 4-year waiting list before people will have vehicles. I mean, 4 years in automotive world is a long time. I mean, that's
Yeah.
basically, at least for Toyota, that's basically you're at mid cycle refresh for the vehicle. So it'll be interesting to see how Toyota responds to all this and the significant increase in demand for their products, not just Land Cruisers, all of them. I mean, it's a very interesting time in terms of the automotive world, beyond just electrification or whatever is going on there. But even from the point of view of, who are these companies going to become? What is Aishin going to be making in 10 years when there are very few actual manual transmissions used, where it's all CVTs?
Right.
It'll be interesting from that point of view. And I don't doubt that Toyota is going to be able to convince all their suppliers to be able to make the types of moves they need to make to recreate themselves in the new automotive environment that we're seeing, especially through electrification and the simplification of vehicles. What we're seeing, electric vehicles need significantly less moving parts than its ICE counterpoint. I mean, a counterpart. It'll be interesting, what's going to happen to the global 150,000 people that work for Aishin Seiki,
Right.
when you don't have to make when you don't have to make as many automatic transmissions anymore. Are you going to retool them? What are you going to do to your facilities that make, automatic transmissions? I mean, it'll be interesting to see, but again, I'm convinced the ecosystem works. The relationships and Toyota is all about relationships, nothing else. Everything that they do is about creating long-term relationships between their people who provide them with the things they need, and themselves. I mean, that's just going to be the nature of it. Well, I mean, and of course they are Toyota. They're going to have the ability to implement lots of changes that they're going to then push through to other suppliers as well.
Yeah. So I was curious about the point you made about them now sourcing parts from like China or Thailand, some other countries. And I know, like you said, we kind of romanticize when the parts come from Japan. It says made in Japan on the part box. I'm like, oh yes. I mean, I'm guessing there's going to be there's like no worry about quality changing at all when they start outsourcing different countries, because it's still Toyota controlling everything along the way.
Correct.
It's just the name on the box is a little different.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if Toyota's allowing someone in China to make parts for them that are going to be in a Toyota, and I think you're talking about service part support. So the stuff
Right.
the stuff that we go and buy over the counter from a Toyota dealership or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, even if it says made in China or Thailand or Taiwan or wherever the country, or Turkey or France or wherever it may be, the fact of the matter is that the system is actually not inherently, it's 100% the same. I mean, engineering controls, cost controls, production control, manufacturing, tooling, everything is the same. Like, you can go from one Toyota supplier. Let's say you go from a transmission plant for an Aishin transmission plant in Japan, in Toyota City, to Guangzhou, the Aishin transmission plant in Guangzhou. It's going to be a mirror image, and it's going to be literally this. I mean, they would not do it if it was less quality. They just wouldn't. They can't. It's that's sort of I think that's a psychological thing that we just have to get over. The end
Exactly.
user. I mean, I'm not too concerned about the quality of, let's say, 82-121 60343, the main wiring harness for an FCJ 80 with a 1FCFE. And it has it's no longer made in Japan. It's made in Vietnam now. Actually, Yazaki has outsourced most of their wiring harness and loom manufacture to Vietnam. And I'm not too concerned. I can guarantee, because it looks the same. The part numbers on it, when you look at the connectors and the 5-digit embossed part number on it, it's still the same. I don't see any reason to worry about the veracity or the quality of a part that maybe is made in China or in Thailand or in Taiwan or in Vietnam or in France or in the United States or in Mexico, wherever it might be made. But this is a recent phenomenon, i.e. in the sense that we're seeing a lot of introduction, at least in the Land Cruiser, in our world, in the Land Cruiser world. Right. This is a recent phenomenon because obviously inherently the Land Cruiser has always been 100%, made in Japan at Yoshiwara and stuff like that. But I don't see any issues with service part support being made elsewhere. I'm okay with that. Yeah. I have seen no negatives. Now, maybe long term we'll see negatives. I don't know. I mean, this is a recent phenomenon in terms of service part support here in the United States. Again, it goes down to how much does it cost to make something? Yeah. And then what am I going to sell it at? That's it. Every time, all the time. The world becomes a lot easier when you accept that that's the whole point. How small, how little can the production cost be? How much can I save in raw materials, human capital, all of that stuff? When you amortize that all into the cost of a part, how can that be as small as possible? And then what I sell it for to be as big as possible, that's acceptable by the market for me to make money. I mean, it's like business 101. Yeah. And Toyota's really good at business 101. Clearly. True.
So do you see the Land Cruiser enjoying a similar fate, being finally outsourced from the mothership in Japan, like main assembly? I know, in history there have been, partial assemblies shipped out for the CKD. Land Cruiser construction. Yeah.
CKDs. So, I mean, Land Cruiser was built all over the world. It's being built in Portugal right now. It's being built in Kenya right now. The Land Cruiser was built in Russia. The Land Cruiser Prado was built in Russia on the Kamchatka Peninsula. I believe in Vladivostok, I think. I'm not positive. Land Cruiser has been built in China since the 100 series.
Interesting.
Yeah, China is pretty much almost its own market, where most of the Toyota vehicles sold in the China market are built in China. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the Land Cruiser for the China market is built in China.
Okay.
And it's and those are all, again, usually those are cooperatives and partnerships with Chinese manufacturing companies. And again, Toyota has sort of, majority control.
Okay.
But
and so then the ones,
I'm sorry.
The ones assembled in Japan and then are disseminated to the Japanese market, U.S., and just mainly a lot of other places in the world, or where do those end up going?
Well, yeah, obviously everything Toyota Auto Body from Yoshiwara, and now actually Fujimatsu, the Toyota Auto Body Fujimatsu plant, which was Toyota Auto Body moved the coaster assembly from Yoshiwara to Fujimatsu so they could have more capacity of Land Cruiser manufacture at Yoshiwara. And now they realize that they don't have enough Land Cruiser capacity, especially the 70 series. So the pickups now have been moved over to Fujimatsu plant. So your single and double cab for export are being manufactured there. And excuse me. So yeah, Europe, pretty much all of Europe, North America, most of South America, most of the Russian states, most of Africa, your NGO commercial markets, government markets, and then obviously Australia and the GCC all come out of Yoshiwara.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
So
most of the world.
South Africa is the only country that receives. Portugal manufactures all of the Land Cruisers for South Africa, at least the 70 series.
Interesting.
Not the 300, or it wasn't the 200 either, but the 70 series for South Africa comes out of Portugal.
Okay. All those beautiful white 70s in Gibraltar.
No, most of
Or is that
those.
different?
No, those all come from Yoshiwara or Fujimatsu.
Okay.
The entire Toyota Gibraltar Toyota Gibraltar stock holdings for all of your 70 series, Corollas, the Fortuners, which is such a cool vehicle, by the way. I got to drive one. Awesome vehicle. The Fortuners and all your Land Cruiser iterations, Prados and 200s and 300s and 70s, all are from Japan.
Okay.
Yeah. Portugal is for export only.
Huh.
Kenya is for basically Africa sales only.
Okay.
Where else? Obviously, China is its own market. And historically, Brazil, when Brazil started manufacturing the Bandeirantes and their iteration of the Land Cruiser, that went, mainly to the Brazilian market. Some leaked out to South America. And then you had Venezuela, Colombia manufacturer Sofasa in Colombia, and then you had Toyota Venezuela. Those were also for usually regionalization. So,
Okay.
but most of the first world will receive Land Cruisers from Yoshiwara.
Okay. And do those other allowed manufacturers, like in Portugal, do they get a little more leeway in their final construction of the vehicle? I know some of the like the Bandeirante is obviously not exactly like FJ40. They took a different body style and other components. Do they still have that kind of liberty, or have they just, you're going to build this exact Land Cruiser like we do now?
No, they have to make exactly what the Toyota engineers tell them.
Okay.
To. So there are plenty of Japanese people at the Portugal Land Cruiser assembly plant who are making sure, both on QC and QA as well as production engineering, a lot of the components that they're using come in big crates on a big ship to Portugal, and those parts are used. They're not necessarily CKD, or maybe he said some dude saying 100% CKD in Portugal. I've seen body weld there, so I'm not sure that's 100% CKD, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is 100% CKD in Portugal. I don't have enough visibility into what they do there. Just seeing what you can find online. But if it is all CKD, that makes sense. So it's basically an erector set in a box.
Yeah, I want to order one of those.
I wouldn't mind a CKD sitting in my backyard.
Right.
Thanks to this guy UNFJ48 Paris for confirming that Portugal 70 series are CKD.
Very cool. Yeah, this has really been interesting to hear about how the whole Keiretsu system works, which I didn't even quite know what that term meant. I had to look it up, and I saw that the loose translation was it headless but connected?
Yeah.
I thought that was quite fascinating. I didn't realize that the system was that, complicated, web-like. I always assumed Toyota was this overlord, like you were talking about, a tiered system.
Yeah, no, it's very much like a complicated web. That the book I recommended to you, the Fujimoto one that I told you to go get, which is a great book, and he really develops this notion of the black box system of engineering and design and building. It's called, in other areas, it's called design in engineering, but. That book is a great book to really, really understand how the system developed over time. Again, that book is about 20 years old, so we're dealing with it was printed in 1994 or 95, or published in 1994 or 95, which meant that his research most likely was late 80s, early 90s. His data collection and any of the empirical work that he did with the Toyota suppliers, but he did have very good access. So, as a snapshot of how the historical development of Keiretsu occurred, and product planning, as well as part design, black box theory of supplier interchange between supplier and the mothership. It's a great book for that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to dig more into it. It's in the mail somewhere. Hopefully it gets here.
I'm waiting for books too, you know. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for, taking the time to sit down and talk with us about this. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add. I'm really curious to hear more about the just-in-time part system. That sounds quite crazy and stressful to me. But
maybe next month we'll talk about that.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there again, like anything associated with Toyota, we're just seeing, this hour conversation is just a tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's so much involved. There's so much involved with how Toyota does everything, and everything is codified. Again, I always tell people, like, nothing is random, nothing is off the cuff, nothing is, oh, they just decided to do this one day. Like, none of that exists. Everything is planned. Everything is designed. Everything is thought out and really, really constructed in a very, very meticulous, systematic way. That's really the truth.
Yeah.
So anyway.
It shows.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, owner. I really appreciate it.
Happy New Year to you, man.
Yeah, you too.
And
thanks everyone for watching. Really appreciate it. And join us next month.
Looks like Cruiser Cult is doing very good. Congratulations to you guys.
Thank you. We are working our butts off to make it as good as possible for everyone.
You guys are doing a great job. You and Dave and whoever else is involved with Cruiser Cult up there in the Seattle area. You guys are doing a great job, and it's really nice to see how you guys have grown and the types of things that you guys are bringing to the table, especially with the literature and documentation that you are hosting on your website. That stuff is like really spot on. And it's really enjoyable to see your progression. So congrats to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, buddy.
All right, man. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Be well. Talk to you again.